It's actually one of the biggest mobile forensics units in the country. It allows them to process the evidence more quickly. They are hoping to solve this one. Day 3 of a homicide investigation. At one point, deputies focusing on the garbage area downstairs from where a woman was found dead. The victim's second-floor apartment is still blocked off, a biohazard bag and evidence markers on the ground. Family identifying her as 23-year-old Kayla Hodgson. The Broward Sheriff's Office releasing only few details about what happened. That someone found this young woman unresponsive Wednesday afternoon, and deputies and paramedics declaring her dead.
Kayla Hodgson had no idea that her name had been spoken in anger hundreds of miles away. She lived her life unaware that someone she barely knew had already drawn a line between them, one that couldn't be erased. At first glance, it was just another modern connection. People meet, fall in and out of love, move on. But behind the scenes, there was another story playing out. One person wasn't ready to move on. One person had been watching from a distance, keeping tabs, making plans. The rivalry wasn't open. It was silent. No threats, no confrontations, just quiet monitoring. And then, one day, it wasn't quiet anymore. No one expected the travel plans. No one noticed the movements. Not at first. But someone had crossed a state line, carrying more than just luggage. They brought with them a goal, simple in their mind. Eliminate the problem. Remove the obstacle. Fix what they believed had been stolen. What unfolded next left investigators with questions that peeled back layer after layer of a deadly obsession. How long had it been planned? How much did the victim know? And most of all, what was it that finally turned intent into action? By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was already too late. This is not a story of chance. It is not a heat-of-the-moment crime. It is a calculated series of decisions mapped and executed with alarming precision. In the end, only one person would walk away. But the clues, the timeline, and the motive would all point back to a single origin, a rivalry no one saw coming, and a warning no one heard until it was over. If you enjoy real crime stories that uncover the truth, don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us share real cases, spread awareness, and give a voice to those who can't speak for themselves. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what are your thoughts as the story unfolds. Welcome to True Crime Uncovered, where we examine the cases that shake communities and expose what happens behind closed doors. Real stories, real people, real impact. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Kayla Hodgson, a 23-year-old woman living in Tamarack, Florida, was reportedly involved in a romantic relationship with a man whose identity remains undisclosed in public reports. The man, however, was not exclusive in his commitments. Unknown to Kayla, there was another woman, Sakina Thompson, based in New York, who also maintained a romantic or emotional connection with the same individual. The timeline of the romantic overlap is not precisely defined, but digital footprints and investigations suggest that the rivalry may have extended back weeks or even months. Online activities from the suspect indicated that she had become aware of Kayla's involvement with the man prior to the murder. Evidence gathered later showed that Thompson had been monitoring the situation digitally. Through social media platforms, message exchanges, and possibly mutual online connections, she became aware of Kayla's identity, location, and relationship status. Law enforcement later uncovered online searches, viewed messages, and patterns of viewing Kayla's social media content, suggesting sustained digital surveillance. No official confrontations between Kayla and Thompson were reported before the attack. There were no police calls, restraining orders, or prior complaints that would suggest Thompson had made direct threats. However, private messages and indirect social media posts hinted at growing animosity. These communications would later be used to establish motive and premeditation. Thompson, based on case files and reported data, had a history of controlling behavior. Those who knew her noted instances of obsessive conduct in prior relationships. There were no formal psychological evaluations made public, but interviews collected by authorities pointed to past red flags, including emotional volatility and past jealous behavior. These signs, however, went unaddressed or unnoticed. Sakina Thompson, a woman in her early 20s residing in New York, became the primary suspect in the homicide investigation. Her background revealed little criminal history. However, her digital activity and interpersonal behavior in the months leading up to the crime painted a different picture. Thompson reportedly learned of Kayla through a shared romantic connection to the unnamed man. Once aware of Kayla's existence, she began tracking her online. Law enforcement later presented messages and digital posts, some of which were ambiguous in nature, but revealed underlying hostility and resentment. Her alleged motive centered around jealousy and emotional competition. Investigators reported that Thompson viewed Kayla as an obstacle. The level of detail in her planning suggested a clear intent to confront or eliminate her rival. Evidence would show that Thompson did not act impulsively, but followed a specific series of steps over time. Digital evidence uncovered after the murder included past internet searches related to Kayla's location, methods of travel, and ways to mask identity. Authorities also found saved photos and social media screenshots linked to Kayla's accounts. Travel records showed that Thompson booked airline tickets from New York to Florida. She flew into South Florida and used rideshare services to get to Tamarack. Surveillance and financial records confirmed she brought personal items that may have included a concealed weapon, gloves, and clothing suitable for blending in. On the day of the incident, law enforcement reconstructed the timeline using digital and forensic data. Thompson arrived in Tamarack shortly before the murder. The estimated time of attack was in the early morning hours of June 22, 2024. Kayla was later found deceased in her apartment. The medical examiner reported blunt force trauma as the cause of death. There were indications of a swift and violent encounter. The condition of the apartment did not show signs of forced entry, leading investigators to consider the possibility that Thompson had been let in voluntarily or used deception to gain access. Inside the apartment, forensic analysis revealed blood spatter consistent with a rapid and targeted assault. A potential murder weapon was recovered nearby, a blunt object believed to be used in the attack. Fingerprints and DNA were collected from the scene, some of which were later matched to the suspect. There were no defensive wounds on Kayla's body, indicating a possible surprise attack. No loud disturbance was reported by neighbors at the time. Her body was discovered later that day by a roommate, who immediately called 911. Emergency responders arrived at the scene and determined the death was suspicious. Law enforcement secured the area and began collecting evidence. The initial hurdle was a lack of immediate witnesses or surveillance from within the apartment itself. As the case unfolded, authorities focused on tracking movements before and after murder. Surveillance footage from Kayla's apartment building captured a woman matching Thompson's description entering the premises around the time of the crime. Footage from surrounding businesses, airport terminals, and rideshare data helped map Thompson's route from New York to Florida and then to Tamarack. Witnesses near the apartment confirmed seeing a woman of similar appearance entering the building hours before the body was found. Forensic data recovered from the apartment included fingerprints, shoe prints, and digital evidence from Kayla's phone. Her final text messages and call logs were reviewed. The absence of distress calls or attempts to flee supported the theory that she was caught off guard. Digital evidence showed Thompson's phone had searched Kayla's name, location, and travel details repeatedly before the trip. Authorities also reviewed Thompson's browser history, rideshare receipts, and hotel bookings to confirm the sequence of movements. Interviews with Kayla's friends revealed she had not expressed concern about any threats or unusual behavior prior to her death. No report suggested she was aware she was being followed or monitored. Thompson booked a commercial flight from New York to South Florida days before the incident. Her reservation and boarding pass were traced through airline records. Upon arrival, she used rideshare services to travel to the Tamarack area. Security cameras at the airport and at various points along her route confirmed her presence in Florida. Investigators were able to place her within proximity of Kayla's residence during the relevant time frame. Kayla's address may have been located via social media, tag photos, or shared content. Thompson may also have used reverse image tools or third-party people finder services. Surveillance showed Thompson walking through the neighborhood in the early hours, suggesting she was familiarizing herself with the area. This behavior was noted as additional evidence of premeditation. Following the collection of forensic and digital evidence, law enforcement issued a warrant for Thompson's arrest. She was taken into custody in New York days later. The arrest was coordinated between Florida and New York agencies. Thompson was located at a residence in the Bronx and was taken into custody without incident. She made no public statements at the time of arrest. She was held without bail pending extradition to Florida, where she faces charges including first-degree murder. As of the latest update, she remains in custody awaiting trial. No plea has been entered publicly, and legal proceedings are ongoing. Following the discovery of Kayla Hodgson's body inside her Tamarack, Florida apartment, authorities quickly identified a suspect, 28-year-old Sakina Thompson, who was tracked down and arrested in New York. She was charged with first-degree murder and premeditated homicide based on evidence suggesting a deliberate and targeted killing. The charges were filed under Florida law, but since Thompson resided in another state, interjurisdictional legal cooperation was required to bring her back to face prosecution. Her initial court appearance took place in New York, where she was informed of the charges against her and the warrant issued in Florida. The extradition process followed standard procedure, requiring Florida authorities to present documentation confirming the charges and jurisdiction. Thompson did not fight extradition, which accelerated the transfer timeline. Within weeks, she was moved to Broward County, Florida, where the case will be officially tried. The state attorney's office in Broward County issued formal statements condemning the crime and assuring the public that their prosecution would pursue full penalties under the law. Prosecutors emphasized the interstate nature of the crime, arguing it showed significant premeditation. In early hearings, Thompson was assigned a public defender. Her defense team previewed possible strategies, including mental health evaluations, and raised the possibility of filing motions to suppress certain digital evidence, arguing constitutional grounds related to search warrants and digital tracking methods. At her arraignment, Thompson entered a plea of not guilty. Several pretrial motions were filed by her attorneys. These included requests for mental health evaluations, possible mitigation evidence, and efforts to challenge the admissibility of travel records, online search histories, and surveillance footage. A motion to dismiss based on alleged procedural errors during her arrest was also filed but later denied. Throughout the courtroom proceedings, media presence remained consistent. Local networks and national true crime outlets covered each hearing. Cameras were not permitted during some of the earlier stages, but reporters captured detailed sketches and live updates. Thompson's behavior in court was described as mostly silent, avoiding eye contact, and showing minimal reaction to courtroom developments. As of the latest update, the trial has not concluded. The legal timeline remains active, with further hearings scheduled to determine evidentiary admissibility and jury selection procedures. Prosecutors are reportedly preparing for a capital trial, which may involve expert witness testimony and digital forensic analysis. The murder of Kayla Hodgson sparked significant attention across Florida and New York, particularly due to the unusual cross-state dynamic and the nature of the motive. Local media outlets, including NBC Miami, Local 10, and CBS 4, ran multiple segments covering everything from a crime scene investigation to the suspect's extradition. Visuals of crime scene tape around the Tamarack Village apartment complex became recurring imagery across broadcasts. In the community of Tamarack, the response was marked by shock and concern. Residents expressed unease over security of the neighborhood and the chilling realization that a murder could be executed so precisely in their midst. Candlelight vigils were organized within a week of the news breaking. Friends and co-workers of Kayla attended, placing flowers and lighting candles outside her apartment complex. A GoFundMe campaign was launched to help support Kayla's family with funeral expenses. It gained traction on social media, with many users resharing the link and demanding justice. Statements from Kayla's family were limited but firm. One family member issued a written statement, thanking the public for support and expressing hope that the legal system would provide justice. They declined interviews during the ongoing proceedings. Social media coverage amplified the case's visibility. Hashtags associated with Kayla's name began trending locally. Users on platforms like TikTok and Instagram created awareness videos summarizing the known details of the case and speculating on the possible motives. The case also became a point of discussion in online forums and communities focused on stalking and intimate partner violence. Many use it as an example of how romantic obsession can escalate beyond threats or harassment into full-blown violence. Particularly, the female-on-female nature of the attack added a layer of public analysis, with discussions examining the rarity but severity of such dynamics. The alleged motive behind the murder revolves around jealousy and obsession. Authorities believe Sakina Thompson viewed Kayla Hodgson as a romantic rival. The man at the center of the triangle reportedly had some level of involvement with both women, though the nature and timeline of each relationship remain partially unclear. What sets this case apart is the calculated execution of the crime. The planning, travel, and execution suggest a deliberate intent to remove a perceived obstacle. Psychological assessments may later provide insight into whether this was a moment of mental breakdown or the result of long-standing delusional thinking. Cases involving jealousy-driven violence typically follow a pattern of escalation, emotional outbursts, stalking behaviors, threats, and eventual physical harm. But in Kayla's case, no known threats were made prior to the attack, and no protective orders were in place. The quiet lead-up left no red flags for intervention. This pattern, a silent build-up followed by a deadly action, mirrors behavior found in other domestic or romantic rivalry killings, where perpetrators avoid confrontation but fixate internally. The lack of overt threats in such cases often prevents authorities or families from recognizing the danger before it turns fatal. Experts in gender-based violence have noted that women can sometimes become perpetrators in highly emotional, possessive, or controlling dynamics, especially when driven by perceived betrayal. Control and entitlement, often associated with male offenders, can also appear in female offenders in specific relational contexts. The aftermath of Kayla Hodgson's death has left her family, friends, and community grappling with a deep void. Tributes from loved ones described her as ambitious, self-sufficient, and focused on building a life. Several memorial posts highlighted her work ethic and kindness to others in the hospitality industry. No foundations have been officially established in her name, but awareness campaigns tied to the case continue on social platforms. Local women's advocacy groups have cited the murder as part of ongoing efforts to highlight the risks of intimate partner violence and romantic obsession. Law enforcement has used this case in internal briefings to review gaps in cross-state threat monitoring, especially in non-domestic violence contexts where no legal complaints or protection orders have been issued. The lack of legal history between the parties made it more difficult to foresee or prevent the crime. In public discourse, the case has fueled conversation about the underreported dynamics of female-on-female violence, particularly in romantic rivalry scenarios. Advocates argue that more should be done to recognize obsessive behavior patterns, regardless of gender. As of now, the trial is pending. No sentencing has taken place. Legal observers expect a high-profile trial, with psychological testimony likely to play a major role. Kayla Hodgson's murder remains a stark example of how unchecked obsession, masked in silence, can cross every boundary, including state lines, and end in irreversible loss. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover